I am kind of a private person, so I don't miss that part of show business at all. Looking back on my career in television and making a movie like The Sound of Music from an adult point of view, it actually seems kind of unreal. I was involved in shows that people grew up with, that hold memories for them, and it's a cool feeling. When I die, I want to be the only person in the world not to have seen The Sound of Music. When I was growing up, I had a nanny who would always play The Sound of Music and Bye Bye Birdie, so I was always listening to that stuff. The Sound of Music is set in 1938 in Austria at the time of the Anschluss. My sense of divine brings with it a strange sound of music with its glories, a marvelous melody sounding like a multitude of flutes. I was Aladdin, and then I was Captain Von Trapp from Sound of Music when I was 7 or 8, and then King Arthur. I was always the lead. I've always enjoyed being on stage, acting obnoxious, being someone that wasn't me, hiding behind a character. I love Katharine Hepburn. I love Lisa Lynn, The Sound of Music. I love Julie Andrews. I love Audrey Hepburn. I loved Terminator 2 as a teenager and Sound of Music when I was a kid. I also loved Requiem for a Dream as a college student and Mulholland Drive. And I have loved Lincoln as an adult. They are all the same, as they are all good stories and extraordinary actors. I started off when I was 7 years old doing musicals. I was in Les Miserables and The Sound of Music, and my mum's an actress. My parents divorced when I was young, and when she couldn't find a babysitter, I was in the wings, sleeping. The Sound of Music did more damage to the industry than any other picture. Everyone tried to copy it. We were the biggest offenders. I do get a lot of gifts. I get a lot of things to sign, too. People do collect the memorabilia. Between Poppins and The Sound of Music, there were beautiful plates that they made, and I've signed a lot of them. I spent half my life in a boarding school where we were shown only the sporadic wholesome classic like The Sound of Music. So, I am not familiar with most of the works of the acting greats in Bollywood, Hollywood, or Tamil Telugu cinema. I was obsessed with The Sound of Music. I always feel nostalgic watching it. Neil and I are most thrilled that we were able to bring musical theater to the enormous audience that The Sound of Music reached. I did The Sound of Music. That was my first musical. I have mainly come from a theater background. I did Oliver, here I played the Artful Dodger, and I did The Sound of Music. To me, I grew up watching All That Jazz and Cabaret, and when I was younger, Mary Poppins, The Sound of Music, and Singin' in the Rain. If anything's going to go wrong, it'd go wrong during Peter Pan, not The Sound of Music. One of my favorites is The Sound of Music. When Julie Andrews runs through the hills singing her head off, I always wish that a gust of wind would blow her skirt up. I'm the lucky one who got asked to do The Sound of Music and all the other lovely things that I did. Austria was the last country in Europe to ever put the stage show of The Sound of Music on. I started acting in 2nd grade. My first role was in the Thanksgiving play. I was the Indian chasing the turkey. All the other moms encouraged my mom to get me into acting after that. Also, when I saw The Sound of Music at Music Circus, I knew I wanted to act. When I was doing Family Ties, I was not quite that mellow as a real father. In fact, my wife used to call me Captain Von Trapp from The Sound of Music. I tended to be a little more authoritarian. I had been a very disciplined child myself, so I made the mistake of thinking one size fits all. I saw The Sound of Music when I was 10 and thought that it was the most beautiful singing I had ever heard. I was lucky enough to be the lady that was asked to be Maria in The Sound of Music, and that film was fortunate enough to be a huge hit. The same with Mary Poppins. I got terribly lucky in that respect. We'd never do The Sound of Music because the movie was perfect. At the age of 8, I auditioned for The Sound of Music and made it through to the 3rd round, where we all stood in a row like the Von Trapp family and had to sing. The movie Spinal Tap rocked my world. It's for rock what The Sound of Music was for Hills. They really nailed how dumb rock can be. Growing up, I had one very specific idea of what a wedding should be, and that was the wedding of Fräulein Maria and Captain Von Trapp in The Sound of Music. The Sound of Music was just such an honor to be in, because it was a movie that appeals to so many people, and they just loved it so much and they still love it to this day. For a long time, I resisted seeing The Sound of Music, but when I finally did, I cried. People are so familiar with the show that I think they're perfectly happy to let it go by without asking any questions. There's a passivity to how we experience The Sound of Music. I did my first little kids musical, The Sound of Music, at 5, in a jungle gym, essentially. I was a made-up Von Trapp child, Ingrid Von Trapp. I still absolutely love The Sound of Music and anything with Julie Andrews in it. Guys like Future and me, we help create and shape the sound of music, not just Atlanta music, but music all over. If you really pay attention to the music being made, a lot of that is very heavily influenced by the stuff that we created. I listen to so many songs that's like, damn, this sounds like my music. I have to say that getting to tackle Maria in The Sound of Music at Carnegie Hall was surreal. When I heard my voice, it was all I could do to keep myself from doing a British accent and sound like Julie Andrews. What I do remember is visualization of The Sound of Music, seeing bodies in movement in relation to how music sounded, because my mother practiced at the keyboard a lot and I also went to her lessons. As a 2-year-old, 3-year-old I remember seeing things in movement. I always dreamed of being Maria in The Sound of Music. Carrie Underwood clearly drove The Sound of Music. For Peter Pan, we had terrific actors but not stars, and we did not do nearly as well. I do not knock Poppins or The Sound of Music. They gave me pleasure, and I know they've given a lot of people enormous pleasure. Growing up, I had one very specific idea of what a wedding should be, and that was the wedding of Fräulein Maria and Captain Von Trapp in The Sound of Music. My first break wasn't professional. I was in The Sound of Music when I was 5. I played Gretel, the youngest one, because that was what kind of took off for me in terms of loving acting. Look, when I started out, mainstream culture was Sinatra, Perry Como, Andy Williams, Sound of Music. There was no fitting into it then and of course, there's no fitting into it now. What with The Brady Bunch, Spider-Man, and Sound of Music, I have 3 cults going. In terms of influence, my style icons have been a mixture of Julie Andrews and Olivia Newton-John. When I was little I used to watch Grease, Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music a lot. If you put all those things together you do kind of get my outfits. A slightly tardy nanny in a second-hand outfit. That is pretty much what I wear. For me, even if I'm singing to a very large audience, like in The Sound of Music Live, or in the She Loves Me broadcast, I try to imagine that I am just singing to each individual. It doesn't change my energy other than being perhaps a bit more nervous. I try to sing to each person and right into their individual heart. When The Sound of Music aired live on NBC, 18 million people were talking about theater the next day. That's incredible. Grease felt like a chance for me to participate in that landscape. The Sound of Music is one of my favorite old musical films. I was definitely planning to go to college, but I deferred my admission to Carnegie Mellon to be in a non-equity tour of The Sound of Music. But I made very little money in the tour, and college is really expensive, and I thought I'd never be able to pay off those loans. Climb Every Mountain is a beautiful statement of philosophy. Critics may think The Sound of Music is saccharine, but I think it's profound. The message, that we can't accommodate evil, is just as important today. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.